Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show here on New Zealand Sports Radio. Hi, I'm Paul and I'll be your host this evening. And boy, oh boy, it's going to be a fun one tonight. I can see we're going to have a few differing opinions on some of the topics we're going to be covering off on. So, yes, it's going to be an exciting one, folks. Strap yourselves in. This is you're not going to see uniformity of opinions this evening, I don't think. So, joining me this evening, I have got back on for rugby. It's Ashwin. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm good. I've just returned from a boxing class with the kids.
And as we can see, Ashwin is expecting another lockdown because he's got lots of toilet paper.
No. Sticky labels.
Sticky labels. It looks like toilet paper.
For electrical testing and tagging, which is a requirement under the Electrical Regulations Act of New Zealand and of workplace safety.
So, gyms, testing and tagging, your place to get your to just be compliant. Absolutely.
And if you need fire extinguishers, I can help you out with that too.
But they do look like toilet roll. It's all about. Now you just need a cat. Okay, put them across the doorway, and your cat can come running around the corner and jump over them. And you can make a video about it, and it'll go viral. Well, you would have done that 12 months ago. Evening, Stephen. How are you doing, sir? Can you get comfy?
Yeah, very tough. You just need to get in the right position because I think it's going to be an action-packed hour and something tonight. So yeah, great to be on the TDM again. And Ashwin, great to see you, mate. Need to work.
Yeah, you too, mate. You too.
Need to work on that lighting, though, brother.
I know. I don't know what's going on today. Normally it's actually been pretty good. Just try and bring that in. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, maybe just your skin complexion, but hey, we may not go there.
I've been taking those Michael Jackson pills. Not working.
Dear. Train wreck of a show before we even start. Okay. So some of the topics we have for this evening are the Rugby World Cup 2021, or the Women's Rugby World Cup, has been postponed by 12 months. We'll have a chat about that. The Lions, after talking about having a women's tour for 18 years, have decided to actually pay for a feasibility study. We've had a player in Europe who was injured during training, and she's having to pay for her own operations. So we'll have a quick chat around what's going on over there. Stuff put out an article about sports coverage, and so we'll have a chat about that. And also Super Rugby. Looks like we're a step closer to a Fiji and Moana Pacifica side in Super Rugby as well. No, Ashwin? Or you're typing, or you're replying to something you're typing on, or you're shaking your head at what I'm saying.
No, I'm shaking my head at that. That's all right. We'll talk about it later.
Let's talk about that one later. Okay. So, big news last week: Women's Rugby World Cup has been postponed from, or well, it hasn't been postponed yet. That's not true. There is a recommendation going to the World Rugby Council to postpone it from this year to next year, which I think. A lot of people will say is not a surprise, to be honest, and also probably the right decision, considering that they needed something like 500 guaranteed places in MIQ, managed isolation, that they still haven't done the qualification tournament yet for teams to know who's actually in it entirely, and also look, we're talking about amateur players for a lot of the teams. Therefore, could they really expect them to spend another 2 weeks off and have as well as the tournament length and also a qualifying tournament? I mean, how much time do they need off work, or can they get off work? Pardon me, to attend a tournament. So, I mean, Stephen, no big surprise there.
No, probably not at the stage, Paul. I mean to say the world is pretty much in limbo at the moment, and of course the vaccine seems to be getting out there no matter where you are in the world. Maybe not so much in Aotearoa at the minute, but that's another subject for another day. But yeah, you did right. No surprise at the minute. I mean to say, I think you want, and you know, for a tournament like that, I think you want the whole rugby focus on that tournament. I don't know if it would be in these COVID times.
Ashwin, yeah, agreed.
Look, I mean, To tell you the truth, Stephen, I reckon actually, let's say, we'll talk about why it's, I totally in agreement into postponement, but I actually sort of think that if it did go ahead, it would have massive viewership because of the fact is that there's still a lack of sport that's going on globally. So that's why, you get eyeballs on it. Like what we've sort of saw last year in particular when Super Rugby Aotearoa started, as the fact is that there was massive interest into it because there was just nothing to do. So there was, that was something to do. So I think it would actually, but, I know Paul's a fan of, I think, is it her name Alice Soper?
Yes, gone. Yep. Alice,
it's just going off. And it's just like, I'm sorry, but, what world do you live in? It's just like, apart from New Zealand, the other teams in New Zealand, they haven't been playing rugby. UK's, European teams, the Americans, none of these teams have been playing rugby, and she expects the for the World Cup tournament to go ahead. Not to, is talking about why it shouldn't have been postponed, and they could have tried harder. And it's just like, hello, lady, what planet are you on? I mean, there's so many tournaments at the moment. The T20 World Cup was postponed from Australia, which has got a far more financial impact in moving that than this tournament. And it's like, get real, basically. Get off your soapbox and be constructive. People are trying to actually support women's product, and you doing like that just turns people off that would actually be wanting to support it.
The okay, because I thought to be honest, she's shot from the hip a couple of times. In all honesty, I think she's changed her opinion a few times over the last few days. Because initially she was like, "Yep, the right thing to do," because 10 weeks, blah blah blah. As you say, she's so yeah. Whilst on the whole, I like her enthusiasm. I think she does make some good points.
Oh, look, enthusiasm, mate. Enthusiasm, one thing though. If you want people to take you seriously, make serious comment, not off the hip. A lot of shoot. I mean, we know from it's not having a pot shot at women. We do that with men as well, men commentators. Stephen Jones. How many of us do any of us here read Stephen Jones articles?
Well, no. So they're behind a paywall.
Well, hang on. Let's not be flippant about it. No. Hang on. I don't want to be flippant about it. I want to make a point here. That's a valid point. Yeah. We don't read his articles because they're garbage. They're trolling garbage, and so you don't. So if you want to be taken seriously, be serious about your content. Be realistic about your content.
Now, I think she did make a number of good points, in which you should agree or disagree with. But I don't think the Black Ferns captain should have found out about it via an email after the media did.
That's an administration issue within the New Zealand Rugby Union, not about the decision. That's not about the decision. I'm sorry. I'm still going to carry on this way. You said she made some valid points. Yeah, your valid points are going to get washed away while you're making silly points.
Okay, these are the valid points. No, I'll agree that yes, it should have been postponed. That's how I started. But there are a number of valid points that have come out around how it's gone and what other organisation has been happening. So, for example, the Black Ferns captain should not be finding out by an email after the media. No, that communication needs to be better. We need to have a plan B. Are the Black Ferns going to have any games at all this year? At the moment, we just had deadly silence out in New Zealand rugby as to what is going to happen for the Black Ferns this year. They've known this tournament was most likely to be postponed for a while now. It's that they haven't found out at the last minute like everyone else has. They should have some plan. We should be hearing something that they're organising something for the Black Ferns to do for the rest of the year, as well. There needs to be a plan B, and there needs to be better communication with the players. I think it's really poor on that side of things.
It's probably fair to say the New Zealand Rugby Union 2 years in a row have probably dropped the ball in and around women's rugby. If you can think back to our first COVID lockdown last year, and all of a sudden everything was announced in and around various tournaments and within New Zealand. We're talking Super Rugby, and of course Mitre 10 Cup Rugby, and of course, shivers, there was the women's game that got completely forgotten about, and it took Alice Soper to come out and basically via Twitter and say, "Hey, guys, what's happening with women's rugby? We've actually grown your game. We've got a Rugby World Cup scheduled for this year." And of course, I think the rugby union, it's fair to say, they've actually dropped the ball once again. They really somebody needed to be, there needed to be some communications going on in the background. I must admit, I'm having a bit of a chuckle to myself. Is Alice Soper becoming the Aliota Sopulu of the international women's game?
Women's
Probably
game.
not quite as brash as Aliota when he comes out with some of his.
Oh, it's just starting out. Come on, give her a chance.
But on saying that, you know, she's basically standing up for the women's game, and you've got to respect her in that situation. But I think once again, I think she has to, you know, like her dad Barry Soper, who's a political journalist. I think sometimes you got to go and do some digging first before you shoot your mouth.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think I think what you're talking about in terms of forgetting about certain aspects of the game or components of the game, that comes down to the structure of the NZRFU rather than actually the comms team, let's say, missing out. What is the structure of the NZRFU in terms of men's rugby, women's rugby, junior rugby, club rugby? What is the structure? Who is the, for the want of a term, the manager of women's rugby? And what is he leading? And what's the team he's leading? What are they doing in terms of looking at what's going on, what's the future is, what they have to plan? What are they doing? So instead of sort of like chopping the head off at the top and saying, oh, you guys at the top are stuffed up, actually, is the structure right? Is there a manager of women's rugby?
Well, I think we can be fairly safe to say that that New Zealand rugby tends to will happily champion, say how wonderful its job it's doing, but and use it for publicity, but will then not put the effort. Now, I'm not talking about resourcing necessarily in necessarily straight up money for players, because I don't think that the game's not in a situation to do that. But there's definitely space for better resourcing or better organization of it. Yeah, because clearly they haven't.
But that still doesn't answer the question. Is there, like, if you're let's say they are a corporate, right? They're a corporate. Yep. So in a corporate organization, you've got your products and you'll have your product managers for those products. Who is the product manager for women's rugby? Because they're the one that's failing. They're the ones that have to be held accountable in this times of holding people accountable. These are the ones that have to be held accountable for what's happening around communication in women's rugby.
Whilst I'll Google away and try and find out, and it's very unlikely I'm going to get anywhere near it. We can try and find out if there is somebody or not. I mean, I suppose the other thing, just going back to last year, I mean, they did organise the international. I mean, as I said, it was the Black Ferns played the Aussie women team, and no, they didn't.
I thought they did play.
No, last year they played a Possibles versus Probables.
Possibles, yeah, right.
2 games against Barbarian.
So, but the reality is that who can they play?
Oh, look,
right?
They eventually got around to doing something.
No, what I'm saying is that, okay, so going forward now,
who
can they play? Who can they play?
Well,
that's the question. You know, who is out there?
Yeah, so I mean, there is the Wallaroos as a potential. Now that's going to require quarantining at some as we've seen already. There's the potential of Fiji. I mean, it's Fiji, Samoa. Both of those. One of them has Fiji's qualified for the Women's Rugby World Cup. Samoa could do. Now, is it going to be a one-sided affair? Yes, it probably would be against those. But you could run some sort of game against them as well. Plus, we'll end up seeing a Possibles, Probables, and Barbarians thing again. But at least let us know that you're planning something or something is in the works.
I tell you where they've dropped the ball. I tell you where they've really dropped the ball is that, and this should have happened pre-COVID anyway, is that it's women's Super Rugby teams. Women's Super Rugby teams should have been in existence about 3 or 4 years ago. And if they had done that 3 or 4 years ago, then you would have women's rugby happening right now as well.
Yeah, and Jamie Wall is one of the people who's has gone down, has written an article in RNZ saying the same thing. Yeah.
And you know, guys, also a great opportunity to. We know how much talent there are running around at Farah Palmer Cup level, and sometimes some of that talent runs around in some of the lesser sides as well, and doesn't always come to the top. But we all know the best way to bring those players through to another level is take them to another level, and a Super Rugby team will all of a sudden elevate those players who might be playing for a Tasman or a Hawke's Bay or a Taranaki, who will basically get overlooked, but maybe good enough to go to that next level.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I think that's more constructive by doing that.
In answer to your question earlier about the structure of New Zealand Rugby, no, they don't. So they've got a chief CEO, Mark Robinson, someone in charge of people, safety, and well-being. Yeah, whatever. Then we got Steve.
Safety.
This is it's going to end up falling under Steve Lancaster, who is the general manager for community rugby, because Farah Palmer Cup is all those sides are community sides or professional sides as far as funding goes. You've then got Chris Rendrum, who's general manager of professional rugby and performance, who covers off on the professional teams and Super Rugby. And then you've got Darren Shand, who's the All Blacks manager. So you're right. There's nobody in there to
That's
head
the
up
whole.
women's rugby.
That is the whole. And that is the whole. So if you're going to have a go at NZR, if you have a go at that, don't worry about the comms yet. Yeah, comms is not going to be there if you haven't got a person who's focused on the women's game. So the whole is, looking at root cause. What you want to do is actually look at root cause. Root cause is that there isn't a person at top level that focuses on the women's game. That is the problem. Yep.
Does Farah Palmer have some prominence in the New Zealand Rugby Union these days? Well, she's on the board. So yes. So Farah Palmer, Jennifer Kerr, and are the two women on the board currently. It's for those as we're talking about governance and stuff. Sorry, go on, Stephen.
Paul, you'd actually think there would be an advocate for the game in a similar way to the New Zealand Rugby Union Players Association. Surely, does the Players Association do they have somebody? To say, I'll do the job, for crying out loud, if that's the case. But I think that's what women's rugby needs. They need somebody very, very similar to our friend.
Rob Nicol. Rob
Nicol, who does that job for women's.
But should Rob Nicol? Should Rob Nicol? Again, you've now got to change the structure of the Players Association, right? Because there will be professional women that are part of the Rugby Players Association, I would assume now, because there's professional women players. So effectively, Rob Nicol should be at the top, and then you should have somebody underneath him that looks after the men's game and somebody underneath him looks after the women's game. Or, is focusing on that.
And there's also a Maori Rugby Board as part of New Zealand Rugby, which Farah Palmer heads up, she chairs that one. So again, how much time she has to focus on the women's side if she's also focused on the Maori side?
I sort of think, though, she's at a board level doing that, right? So that's more a subcommittee at a board level, was it? Because she's on the board. She's not an employee as such.
That's correct, yeah.
So she's on the board. So therefore, she would be doing that as a subcommittee at a board, at a director's level. So that's still, they need to look at why isn't there, if you've got a subcommittee for the Maori All Blacks, why haven't you got a subcommittee for women's game? And then the flow on down effect is that you just don't have the focus at that top level. If you don't have the focus at the top level, how are you going to have the focus down the chain?
Agreed. Did the union sack half its staff? Sacked half its, I think, its headquarters staff. But who knows how many of those have now been rehired as
usually happens when they sack half the staff at any organisation.
Yeah.
Crap, we can't do that. We've got to get them back.
Craig says actually a women's north versus south. Not really, because the problem with the south is that unlike in the men's game, where you've got a strong Tasman, a strong Canterbury, a strong Otago, and also Southland. In the women's game, Southland doesn't even exist. Otago and Tasman are both very weak, and you've only got Canterbury down there. So you can't do north-south in the same way as you can with the men's game. Unfortunately, that's why they went probables possibles, even though probables possibles was not actually probables possibles. It was just two even sides.
Do you know, Paul? Sometimes it's easier to pull one. If you've got one strong team with a couple of additions, sometimes it's a lot easier as opposed to get all those combinations. So if you were picking a side out of Auckland, Waikato, Bay of Plenty,
Northland,
Northland as well. Even if they were going to maybe look at a concept like that, there might be some girls who basically first score, here we go again, when it turns to eligibility, who may have scored down in the South Island. And
You don't,
to Auckland.
but Steve, these days you could just say, I identify as a South Islander, and then you'd be eligible to play for them.
Right then.
I feel Māori. I'm going to play for the Māoris.
Yeah, sure, Frank Bunce. I feel Samoan.
Someone says, on an unrelated note, it's not going to be totally environment related because while we're putting the boot in, I'll continue on New Zealand rugby. Let's continue.
But Paul, I just saw one a piece come up. Somebody said good evening from the lovely Canterbury. Having sat in the crowd down in is it Go Willie 83. My last experience sitting in the crowd down in Canterbury wasn't a good one. The Blues got pumped that night, and I got told where to go. I got told where the airport was. I'm just trying to where he got that lovely bit.
when my parents were travelling, doing their camper trip, they got told in the North Island, wow, the people in the South Island are so friendly all the way around. So there you go. They actually found people in the North Island to be friendly too. So there you go. Anyway, so Simon said, on an unrelated note, did you guys get the survey on the Mitre 10 Cup from months ago? Yes, I think we did. I think we talked about it then. What's interesting though is that it's not going to be the Mitre 10 Cup, is it, again this year? Because that was the last year of sponsorship from the Mitre 10, and we've had absolute radio silence out of New Zealand Rugby about cricket. A new sponsor. So yeah, cricket's again.
Quite interesting. Quite interesting, Paul. There was a article on Stuff, I think it was. Dale McLeod, the Southland coach, he's come off the long run and had a crack at the New Zealand Rugby Football Union because now that was pretty much in and around how the Mitre 10 Cup was going to look. And I think he pretty much totally disagrees that they should split it into a little bit like the Farah Palmer Cup. He believes they should just leave it alone. So that's an interesting article if you get the opportunity to pull that.
I look. I mean, I saw the survey, and the survey leads you into answers, so it's not a good survey anyway. But the structure isn't terrible. But the issue that I have is there's like Mitre 10 Cup or No Name Cup is in the last couple of years has actually been a really good product. Has been really coming along really well. So, why would you want to go and change something that's actually getting a bit of traction and actually starting to get a good following, some good content, good games happening? The games, I mean, crossover games are actually not that, I mean, between, let's call it Division 1, Division 2, but Championship and Premiership, aren't actually that as one-sided as they used to be. Generally speaking, you still know what the result's going to be unless there's a major upset, but there's still much closer games than they used to be. So realistically speaking, why would you want to change something now that's actually starting to work?
This is quite interesting.
The problem for my think up isn't the structure of the games, it's the marketing of it.
Yep.
Yeah, just also to quote something that Dale McLeod, the Southland coach, obviously he's not very happy, but at the moment he basically says, I wouldn't have a clue what the format will be by now. I would normally have our planning done. We'd know where we'd be going, and we would have started to book flights and accommodation. So this is pretty much what we're getting from one of our provincial coaches at the moment. So you've got to ask the question. The Nocturnal Rights says, get the All Blacks playing in it, generate hype to get the crowds back. No. The great thing about one of the strengths of New Zealand rugby is that we don't overplay the players, right? They don't have to play too many games. And the only way you can do that is by having a tier of rugby that's available for the Super Rugby players who are not internationals to be able to play. If you try and just have your All Blacks playing every single game, then they're just going to burn out. It works because they're away playing international, and Mitre 10 Cup is being played at that time. So no, I disagree with getting the All Blacks back into playing the Mitre 10 Cup, unless they're coming back from injury and all that kind of stuff, or they have, or between if they're part of the greatest squad, the wider squad, not getting game time, fine, but don't try and force it. To my mind, on that one. And talk about the North-South, we saw one of the problems with the North-South one was that you ended up with teams that were not even. Canterbury basically just
thumped most of their teams apart from I think Wellington was about the only one that they didn't actually thump. I mean, they beat them comfortably. Whereas, Canterbury versus Southland. I mean, would Southland want to be playing Canterbury and Tasman every year? I'm not sure. So yeah. So Aaron's just back from the pub. So, oh my word, the chat could be about to light up. So it's all.
I'm going to ask. I've got to just carry on. Which line of thought was it? Nocturnal, because I said lots of stuff.
Yeah, that's why I didn't bring that one up. I wasn't sure what he was referring to.
Which line of thought was it? Then I was the hot potato. I thought they were all hot potatoes. We just need some sour cream to go with it. So anyway, moving on then, more women's rugby. Look, there's a play. This is what we're thankful in New Zealand. Right? The ACC is fantastic. I don't know how it ever came about. I don't know who thought it up, but it works brilliantly. Because over in the UK, we have an international player who was playing for a club, Bristol Bears. Now, Bristol Bears, the side that can drop £1 million a year to pay Charles Piatow, can find the money to hire Sami Radradra. Let's be honest, he don't come cheap, but somehow can't afford the £8,000 for one of their players who got injured during training to have an operation. Which is just unreal. The fact that you've got the Tyrrell's, what was the Tyrrell's Premier 15, Premier 18s, whatever it's called, Premier 15s, which is the top level of women's rugby outside of France. And they don't even. Yeah, sorry, that's my motorbike going past my garage.
I thought you were staying next to an airport. There was a plane taking off.
Cool sound effects, Paul. He's got a soundboard.
Well, look, yes, I have been shopping, but I can tell you, sound effects was not what was in this box. By the way, I'll let people know in my pulling back the curtains on Friday with my article what was in that box. Anyway. Yeah, come on. If you're going to have players playing for you, you have to pay for their insurance, medical insurance. So it just doesn't that one I just really don't get.
I don't know. I mean, I look, can't disagree with you there. I suppose it's just understanding the structure of rugby in Europe, the UK, and knowing how it works. I suppose is the fact is that is it an amateur sport? Is it more a club? Like our club competition, where I mean, like your clubs aren't going to have insurance and the like. So I'm just wondering, is it more like that? And I think I suppose it's hard to say. I mean, like you do sort of look at it and think, hang on, you're paying $1 million players on one side and not covering medical bills for amateur players on the other. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's without knowing the full structure, how it all works. It's a hard one to really comment on.
What one of the problems that the women are finding is that actually it's semi-pro, and therefore their the insurance they get by being kind of part of by their kind of by being members of clubs or that therefore get covered by the RFU insurance kind of thing, and that amateur insurance doesn't count for them because they suddenly become semi-pro. Now at semi-pro, some of them are saying that it doesn't even cover their petrol to get to training in games. And then if they take out personal insurance, it's £150 a month. So they're suddenly like, well, hang on, I'm going to be even worse off now because I'm suddenly playing a higher level or trying to push this game forward. So it's a bit of a mess, and it just needs to be a few people have not realised. I think that their insurance didn't suddenly become null and void because they're playing for different
I think actually who needs to take up the cudgels on that one is I mean, there's got to be a players' association associated with the game, and there isn't. Well, that's where the problem is. That's where the problem is.
Yeah, the Players' Association only covers Premiership rugby players on the men's side. That's all they cover.
Oh, okay. So I mean, like, there's no semi-professional ones then. No, they don't cover semi-professional players.
So men who are playing in the Championship aren't covered by it.
Okay.
Etc. So yeah, no, it's a.
So it's only the fully professional.
Yep. And this is, I guess, this is again another reason why we're actually, whilst we have bashed New Zealand rugby a lot this year, this show, one of the good things is that because it's all because that central control in New Zealand rugby, rather than having all these clubs, that there are set standards and all these things are covered and controlled. And players who are playing Mitre 10 Cup get proper, or Farah Palmer Cup do get either insurance or covered by ACC, because they do actually.
Well, in fact, I mean, the players without insurance are covered by ACC.
Yeah.
So you don't even a fully professional player, if they're playing in New Zealand solely, realistically doesn't have to have insurance because ACC covers it. But if you want to have a top up, then you have your own insurance.
So so it's a bit, as I've heard before, it's the Rugby Championship can be, which is the second tier in men's competition, can be called the Wild West. Some of those guys are on week-to-week contracts and all sorts of stuff, so it can be a bit of a mess over there in the UK. That one. So yes, after 18 years of talking about a women's Lions tour, so they found a sponsor who's going to pay for a feasibility study, which seems like a bit of a farce.
Sounds like the Labour Party's taken over, mate.
That'd be a working group.
That'd be a working group working on a feasibility.
A working group. They are red.
They are red. Yes. Okay. Fine. You can take them. I'll let you have that one.
Go through the gap. There was a big gap in the midfield there.
Deary me. Anyway, we're trying to keep politics off here because we're going to end up shouting at each other.
So back. But it's. I mean, I suppose the question comes down to who are they going to play? If you put four teams together from Europe who make up opposition in the women's game, who are they going to play? The Black Ferns.
They can play the Black Ferns, so they can also play Canada and also the USA.
So Canada's pretty much gone off the boil.
Because if you think about the teams that were in that back in 2019, they had that
tournament in San Diego, was it? Or...
That's right, yeah, and that was USA, Canada, New Zealand, England, and France. So look, those are the places that they could tour. They couldn't tour South Africa; it would be a total waste of time. The Wallaroos,
even Australia. Even Australia is not going to be no competition there either. So, look, I mean, I think what you need to do, the other thing you have to look at is the fact is that why keep copying or following in the footsteps of what's already been? Come up with something that's actually unique, develop something that actually is specific to your environment. Would be the way to go.
I'll tell you what.
Ashwin, sorry, go on, Sim.
I read about something somewhere. I don't know which article it was, but maybe a suggestion was a women's British Lions team touring New Zealand would be an interesting concept.
Where's he been the past 5 minutes? That's what we've been talking about, Steve.
That's what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
He's been reading the comments.
Yes, I have actually. So I've had you guys on mute.
Yep. I reckon. No. But seriously. I reckon that they should get the home nations together and do a women's Lions team.
Thank you, boys. Okay, now,
I don't know if you're allowed to play that tune anymore, Steve.
No,
I think it's been cancelled.
Show might get cancelled. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
So anyway, Ashwin does actually make a good point. Is right. One of the comments that was made by I think it was Steve Chu probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, was that, look, we don't want to make the same mistakes professionalizing the women's game that we made when we professionalized the men's game. Was kind of what he said. Now, it wasn't clear what mistakes he was talking about at the time, but he never went to clarify what those mistakes were. But very true. Why are we know that the structure of the men's rugby game is dysfunctional and doesn't work. Right? It's financially unstable, and there's player welfare is an issue because there's too many games. So why go about copying something that we know needs fixing rather than trying to build it better?
I'm actually thinking more blue sky mining type scenario. Look at the strengths of your game and come up with competitions using the strengths of your game.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything about the men's game or anything like that. Don't go men's game. Take your game and develop your game. Look at the strengths of your game and see where you can grow it and where you can build it and how you can build it and how you're going to create that product that is marketable, that people are going to watch and spend money on.
Yep. No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Don't copy something that come up with.
Well, don't worry about the fact that it's not broken or anything like that. They're taking the Lions, for example. Lions aren't broken. The Lions are a very successful team. It's followed. Everybody loves the Lions tour. That's why South Africa's sort of like absolutely pulling their hair out because they can see that the Lions tour is going down the gurgler for them. As a fact is that everybody wants a Lions tour. But just because it works for the men doesn't mean that you should copy it for the women.
Well,
so not just the negative, the positive as well.
Yeah, but again, it doesn't fit in the rugby calendar. So you've got all the clubs in particularly the Gallagher Premiership clubs don't like it and are forcing it to be shorter and shorter and shrinking it and saying no, you have a smaller and smaller window. So no, it's even that doesn't. Whilst the Lions is successful amongst fans and does create a good income, even that doesn't fit properly in the calendar and doesn't properly work in reality. Unfortunately, I love it. I think a lot of people do, but I still think it doesn't. There are parts of it in the men's game that it doesn't work for them. So, Ashwin, we caught you shaking your head at the beginning there when we were talking about Super Rugby, and news has come out today about Fiji and Moana Pacifica being a step closer to their existence because New Zealand Rugby has said that, or not necessarily has not said because it's all rumor. Rumor has it that they're going to prepare to share the TV revenue. And I saw you shaking your head, so I was wondering what's.
No, actually, so I because we'd been talking about the women's game prior to that. Okay. I thought it was the thing about the Fiji and Samoa putting a women's team together. I thought that's what that was. Sorry, no, it's Super Rugby. No, Super Rugby. That's look, ideologically speaking, it's a fantastic concept. In reality, it won't work.
Why?
Oh, you're talking about clash of cultures. Well, basically. Depends who runs it. It depends who runs it. Okay, put it this way. Depends who runs it. If the administration out of those areas are the ones that are going to run it, then the chances of it being successful based on previous installments of things that have happened, I would doubt that it would be successful.
So you're saying, Ashwin, that the running of the team won't be successful?
Well, it all filters down, doesn't it? We support a team that we've seen that with. If it doesn't work at the top, it filters down all the way to the paddock.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. One thing I will say, I think these Pacific Island teams, because they've been knocking on the door for so long, I think they'll be actually quite motivated to actually prove themselves in a super rugby competition. Okay, now we all know it might. That passion and what you bring to the table might take you so far, but if they can build a base off the back of that, listen, I suspect they'll be way more successful than, say, for example, when a Kings came into the Southern Kings came into Super Rugby, and I even I still got my doubts about teams like the Western Force, when they came into rugby, and the Sunwolves, look how long it took them to basically get together as a franchise. I suppose from my point of view, I just want to see what it brings to the table. And, there's a lot of people out there who've wanted this. I just want to see how this plays out, or else we'll never know.
About wanting to play for a team like that. So if the administration and management was able to be successful, the team would go very well.
And it might even get to the stage, anything that can help our Pacific Island friends with building their international game, where they stay down this part of the southern hemisphere and play their rugby down here, and they develop their game in a Super Rugby competition. It can only be really good for the Pacific Islands at an international level, as opposed to heading off to France, where the clubs are very reluctant to release their Pacific Island players.
Well, look, at the end of the day, it's as long as you can keep the actual governments of those countries out of the mix, you got a shot at it, right? You got a shot. As soon as those governments get involved, and we know that's a lot of the rugby is influenced by the governments of those countries, you're going to have problems in that team being successful, right? So if you can put up an administration that can basically hold those, I mean, you imagine any administration of any rugby team trying to hold the Fijian government at arm's length is not going to be an easy task, right? So you're going to have to be able to have strong people that can basically make sure that obviously they're going to have that relationship there, but they've got to hold them at arm's length. If they can't, then there's going to be too much influence from those governments, and it'll fall over.
Now,
because that's what happens now.
One thing that might give you some hope then is that the Fiji Rugby Union is looking for a private capital investor of up to $10 million for the Super Rugby team. And they would be, and in return, they would get majority ownership of the team. So that means that the Fiji Rugby Union would be a minority shareholder, which hopefully would be in the.
Paul. Fijian Rugby Union is a puppet for the government of Fiji. At the end of the day, and at the end of the day, you would have to any private equity investor that goes in there and goes, oh yeah, I've got 51% and I run the show and I make the decisions. Tell that to Frank.
On the other side of the coin, we run with it. Okay, it falls apart. It's not administered well, and then the people who are against it can go back and say, "Well, we told you so."
Yeah, but I don't want that to happen, Steve. I want it to be, that's the thing. You know what I'm saying? Is like I want there to be some strength in the Pacific Islands rugby, but the reality is that the only way that's going to happen is if the politicians stay out of it. The local government, a local rugby governance, so the Samoan Rugby Union, the Fiji Rugby Union, the Tongan Rugby Union, they stay out of it because we know how they operate as well, right? And so it really does have to be a standalone entity that basically draws on the players, but it has nothing to do with any of the governance of the country or the rugby union from that country. Otherwise, we know from previous iterations of things going on, money that's been provided by World Rugby to those nations, and it just disappears, right? It's for the players, it's for the game development, and it's like it disappears. So I think it'd have to be an absolute arm's length setup. Otherwise, and we don't want people to be able to say, "I told you so." We want it to be, you want it to succeed. So you've got to look at, talking about before about looking at the past and not copying the past. This is a scenario where you do have to look at the past and say, how do we avoid that happening, and what do we have to put in place so it doesn't happen?
Now, the Moana Pacifica one, being based in South Auckland, shouldn't have the same issues, thankfully. So that one won't have those issues. That one then does ask the question of where they're getting the players from, and how they and the Blues coexist. Because I think it's a strange place to have a team, but there you go. But so yeah, you're right. And yes, some people might say, hey, look at the Fiji Drua. That worked well in the NRC. Yes, but there was no real money in it. And the So there wasn't any real money for the corruption really to happen there, and the money went straight into paying the actual sort of coaches and players rather than into an organisation that then tried to run it. When World Rugby funded that one, so yeah, so I don't. Whilst you might look at Fiji Drew and go, "Hey, look, things might have changed." I don't think that's a good guideline as to what could happen with their.
I mean, with the draw, was it effectively just a club in Australia, a Fijian club in Australia?
No, they played out of Fiji.
Okay.
So it was a World Rugby funded side that played out of Fiji.
So if they were able to, I mean, because they were successful. Let's face it, they went well. They went well. So that might be a model that you can use as a base to start your platform from.
Yep, maybe, but it's not. Looking at it and the sounds of it, it doesn't. So far, it looks like that's the way that New Zealand Rugby is dealing with this one is saying, look, you're a franchise. You have to manage yourselves. Shows you've got the cash and the structures in place to do it. Whereas World Rugby was very much a work with Australia Rugby and Fiji Rugby and say, okay, let's have a team in and who are your players? Right, we'll pay him, we'll pay him, we'll pay him, and we'll pay for you to have a coach. We'll pay for your travel stuff rather than, I think, here's 10 million, you go away and just figure out how it's run. So yeah, I don't think that. Unfortunately, I don't think they are following the same.
Look, I mean, I think if this could happen, it's a great thing because I mean, like if you look at it, I mean, Super Rugby is going to change. And let's go to a post-COVID world where things are now starting to get back on track and we're getting back to some level of normality. Super Rugby is not going to be what it was pre-COVID, right? The chances of South Africa now coming back into a Super Rugby environment are looking pretty slim. Would that be fair to say?
Zero, absolutely zero.
Yep.
South Africa and South Africa, Argentina, and Japan will not be part of Super Rugby.
Yeah. So effectively, they need to look at how are they going to create a competition, and they need something like that as part of the growth of that base of their competition.
Yep. Simon says the majority of Super Rugby will still play in Europe. No, I think you'll find that actually there is, whilst they get paid more in Europe, a lot of them would actually like to be able to earn a living at home.
Secondary, Paul. Secondary. Let's look at the Piatals. Let's look at the Luatuas that have all gone. They were getting paid here, but they took the bigger money because it's like that was the opportunity to make sure that they set their families up. Then they look at, like with Piatau now, saying he wants to play for Tonga. Now that he's comfortable, he's got that base nest egg, savings in the bank. Now we look at playing for the love of the game for the team that he wants to. I still think Simon's right. Initially, you're still going to see that stream of players go north because that's where the bigger dollars are. And the reality is that how many are going to have in a Super Rugby squad? 34? 33, 34, something like that, right? Well, once that 34th player is picked, what about those other guys? Are they going to hang around for injuries, or are they going to head off?
I'm not saying that that there'll be zero Pacific Islanders playing in Europe. No, not at all. But I'm saying that I think the Super Rugby franchise down here will be able to have enough quality to be a decent side. I don't think they'll. I think there's enough. I think there's enough players who will want to. I'm not saying all of the. I'm not saying that you will have all of the Fijian internationals or all of the Samoan internationals available, but I think they'll have enough available to a decent side. I think there'll be enough happy to be at home, especially in the early years after post-COVID, in the fact that the lockdown, the lack of travel, not being able to come home and see their family. I think there'll be a bunch of players who will want to be home because of that. And not wanting to be overseas.
I think, Paul, also there'll be a lot of players out of secondary school or even club rugby where Moana Pacifica will resonate with those particular players, that instead of maybe playing for the Blues, hey, I want to go and play for Moana Pacifica. Or you may have a player who's a Mitre 10 Cup player who hasn't made any of the super squads, and then they get picked up by Moana Pacifica. I don't think, I think you'll find that Pacific Island players who've thrown in their lot with the All Blacks, and maybe a little bit like the Luatuas and the Piatos, there will be those that, because we all know that the All Black players have got such a high profile, and those clubs probably look, he's an All Black, he's probably a really good player, so we pay him a little bit more. But those players that are just underneath that level, I think those are the sort of players that they can develop a wee bit more within Super Rugby, or whether it be the Fijian franchise or whether it be Mana Pacifica guys.
There's nothing stopping a Kiwi going and playing on that team either.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing stopping anyone.
An Australian,
and
Argentinian.
Listen, there will be.
It's going to come down to what rules they set themselves as to how they.
Yep. What their own selection criteria.
What about a Lincoln McClutchy who can't make the?
I was thinking of him before. I was actually thinking. Yep.
Who's considered not good enough to make the Hurricanes, which makes me scratch my.
Hey, let's face it. If Lincoln McClutchy on the weekend would have pinned his ears back and scored that try.
Absolutely.
Gobsmacking that he can't get a contract with the Canes, isn't it?
And those kids will only ever will get better and better. I think there's the kid D'Angelo Leulia who plays club rugby here in Auckland. Dwayne Politawao, our good friend. I mean, so he's probably another one who, Dwayne, did he pick up a super contract with any of the?
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, did he get one?
Did he get one with the Crusaders, Paul?
No, he is. I think he's basically retired from professional rugby, and as he came back from the Major League Rugby, had to find a job obviously here. Found that found that the rugby was going pretty, the job was going pretty well, and actually I bumped into him very briefly at Sylvia Park yesterday, where he was in the coffee shop there, where he was just going for a bit, about to go in for a business meeting. So yes, I think he's entrenched in corporate life now.
Go Willie's trying to wind me up, by the way. Look at the touchy will end up the Crusaders. He wants to good on you, Willie.
Free Willie.
So,
if Lincoln McClutchy got tapped on the shoulders by Scott Robertson, he's not going to say no, is he?
No.
He'd be breaking land speed records getting down there.
Well,
but if you look at the Crusaders recruitment policy, though, is if you don't play for Tasman or the Crusaders, the only way you get in there is as an injury replacement.
What?
Nowadays, you look over the last several years, the players that have arrived there.
No. They go pick him out of first 15. They chuck him into Lincoln College or up at the Marcos, and then they go and select him. He's a local player.
No. Look at what I'm saying. Lincoln McClutchy, because he plays for the Hawke's Bay, wouldn't get in. Whereas, fine. I'm not saying but they only take players who are playing for either Tasman or Canterbury Province. Now, whether they've been born there and going, it doesn't matter about that. I'm just saying at my 10 club level, they've got to be playing there.
Right. So they're going to be in the right. Okay, gotcha.
Because the Crusaders have got academy structures, a bit like the Blues are now setting up with up in Auckland and up in Northland and North Harbour. The Crusaders had that for a number of years. So the only reason that Reece ended up down there was because Makilehi, the winger, got injured.
Manisi.
Mataele, thank you. The only reason that Rennie Rangers is down there is, again, as an injury replacement for a player. All the other players that they've recruited have been from Tasman or Canterbury over the last few years.
Who's his cousin? Come on, Nocturnal. Who's your cousin?
I was offered a chance back. Oh yeah. Come on then. I'm sorry, I missed that comment. Nocturnal, right? Who's your cousin that got a chance? Back
Shane Philpott.
Now, I just see Go Willie 83 mentioned that Brett Cameron is off to the Canes next year. Now that could be That could be correct because he signed with Manawatu, hasn't he?
He signed with. I was just going to say signed with Manawatu.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's be honest. He's not. He really has stagnated at the Crusaders and needs a change.
Pushes All Black games. Oh, Michael Scott. Oh yeah, Michael Scott.
Just to push his just to push his Super Rugby claims, really, or just to push his career full stop. He does. Brett Cameron isn't working at the Crusaders. Well, whether that's because he's just not good enough, or whether it's just the environment doesn't work, who knows?
Oh, I think there's one Armong that's basically take it. Is the number one first five and ain't going anywhere, right? Yeah. So you can do the likes of what Blyndale did and Tom Taylor.
Yeah.
All those guys sat there and basically their All Blacks aspirations went out the window because they weren't prepared to move away from the Crusaders. Yep, definitely. I think he won a title with Auckland with the Blues.
Talking about Michael Scott there, folks, on the podcast. But I mean, Tom Taylor, look, he got plenty of game time as either fullback or as 12 or off the bench. Brett Cameron's not even getting that.
Yeah,
let's be honest. So I don't think.
I was going to say, and he's behind Fergus Burke at the moment as well. So yeah.
So I think it's a bit of a different case with Brett Cameron. Those other guys at least were part of the.
But they were never gonna crack the All Blacks by being shifted around the back line and not cementing a position.
Oh, I totally agree. Brett Cameron
they could have. I mean, Tom Taylor's a classic. He's a very good player, and probably would have spent a lot more time in a black jersey if he was willing to move franchises.
Oh yeah,
particularly a northern one.
I just don't think Brett Cameron's at their level yet.
Absolutely, yeah.
So finally, there's been a piece of work done looking at the coverage of sport in New Zealand by news articles, and the headline is obviously that men's rugby gets more news coverage than every single women's sport combined. In fact, twice as much. So men's rugby or rugby in general in New Zealand gets 22% of the coverage. Does that sound? Do you reckon 22% of coverage and stuff and Herald, etc.? Do you think that's about
We could
right?
be flippant. I don't even know if we're being flippant. Tell you the truth, we're a rugby show. Who cares? Our sport. If you got a problem with it, you get sorted.
This is more in not so much against women's sport, against sport in general. Look, the All Blacks are the only show in town here in New Zealand, right? And actually at 20%, I'm surprised it's not slightly higher than that.
In terms of other sport being higher, more content?
Being that 22% of content is rugby. 19.6, I think it was, percent of content is men's rugby.
I'm getting lost on these stats, Paul.
A fifth of all coverage
is men's rugby.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 20%, 25%.
Yeah.
Is men's rugby.
Yeah.
That's nothing for the number one sport in the country. What do you get in Melbourne on the back page every day? On the back page of a Melbourne paper every day is AFL stories. You don't get that in New Zealand. You don't get, even when rugby was like in Auckland, we take Auckland, when we went through the powerhouse days in the 90s, the New Zealand Herald still had Tuesdays where never had any rugby in the paper on a Tuesday. Paul, whereas if you go back to, as using Victoria as example, Melbourne as example, you don't have a single day without AFL news on the paper there.
Paul, I reckon a lot of the blame should be pointed at rugby themselves, because as we both know, in terms of trying to give the national game coverage, even with what we're doing here at New Zealand Sport Radio, can be difficult sometimes. And all we're really saying to them, hey, we're just trying to give you guys a little bit of free press, a different sort of angle. And what I do like about, like Ashwin mentioned before, the back of the newspapers in Victoria, it's all AFL. But the great thing about it, not all the stories are the same. Some of the stories you get out of rugby are very generic.
Oh,
Jack Goodhue decides to grow a bit of a
mullet.
mullet. It seems like all the networks, whether it's Stuff, NZME, they all jump over that same story. And that's pretty much what you get. And it's condensed down into 22%. Where there's actually other stories out there, but you've just
there's huge amount of stories, rugby stories out there.
Got to go looking.
Right. Look. Let's face. I mean, one of the things that I have a go at the Blues in Auckland when in the NPC time as well is the fact is that I want to know what's happening at the hospital ward in the team. You know, we want to know who are the players that are injured, when are they likely to, how long is their injury going to keep them out for, why hasn't a player been selected? You're not going to go into the details of why he hasn't been selected, but you're right. Has he not been selected because he's been dropped, or has he got the injury? You know, there's so much information that we could be getting, and it's not put out there.
Here's a novel idea. How about highlighting a couple of promising players that are running around in the development squad at the moment? Doing some storage. How much mileage would you actually get out of that from their clubs, from their family, from their friends? I tell you what,
the fans will lap it up. The fans.
If you know what, if you can't even when you want to see who the you can't even get a team sheet on the Blues website on who the development squad is, because you know when the Blues squad was originally named, I think there's about 36 players. Well, let me give you the tip. Not all 36 are playing on Sunday. So what's happening with the other 13 guys or the injured guys? It's really poor. Those are the stories I want to read. Unfortunately, I end up going to a forum. I get more information.
Yeah.
I won't mention their name, but that's where I get all my information, and that's usually through friends of friends. And there's a whole lot of people on these forums looking for that sort of information. Do your work, guys.
Our media is absolutely piss poor in this country. Doesn't matter whether you're talking general news or sports, whatever. Our media in this country suck.
Yeah. Oh.
And people say, "Oh, there's the odd one." Nah, there isn't.
Now, look, obviously the article was all about the lack of coverage of women's sport, but look, the other point here, I mean, we've got other people like Scott Dixon winning IndyCar races, and unless you're into motorsport, you wouldn't know that. We got world beating athletes around the world doing great
let's
things.
Back the truck up here. This is stuff. Let's talk about the irony of this article. Okay, yes. This is stuff. It's owned by a feminist who runs a news organization that's complaining it doesn't have enough women's stories in it. How stupid is that? Geez, a feminist owns the bloody publication and then saying there's not enough women's content. It's your fault. Go hire some journalists. Get them out there. Get them reporting on it. If you want women's sport reported, you're the one that's in control of it. What an idiot.
Yes, there's that. The other side of it is, I'm sure we're going to see the exact same article in the 5 other news websites because, as you said, once one website jumps on it, all the rest just basically copy and paste the same article as well, which is because, again, lazy journalism.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
The $1 media organization.
Well, yeah, that's true. Apparently, the Herald is all America's Cup. I wouldn't know because it's behind a paywall, so I don't go there.
Yeah, can Aaron's his work gets it, so he's a cheap Indian and uses the free access at work.
No.
I'm allowed to say that. I'm a cheap Indian too. It's my Scottish heritage.
You guys use the platform for your ideas. Yes, of course we do. We also do our own platform, and yes, we are part of the 22% of covering mainly rugby. If you look
but then we're not complaining about our content, are we?
No, well, true.
we're not on here saying we should be showing.
We are just when we covered the Auckland Club Rugby last year, we opened up a little bit of a medium to a lot of clubs and a lot of people who you'd never had the love before from anybody, from not even a local suburban newspaper. So they were absolutely wrapped that we were basically covering it because, listen, there are some very, very not just talented players, but also there's some talented coaches and some really good people out there, and more importantly, some really interesting people. Remember, I ran into Mosi Kaloto last year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, back in the provincial days, guy was an absolute legend.
What I was going to say, just you're saying there's lots of interest, the coaches and all that. Look, there's interesting stories out there in the club world, and they're genuinely interesting stories, and they just need a platform to be told on.
And it's not just the it's not just the rugby, but grassroots. Full stop. I mean, I was at the club cricket or grassroots community cricket stuff at the weekend that had great stories as well. All this there's great stories out there. You just got to go find them. One of the best videos I've had recently is me jumping in water because again, that's just whether you want to call bombing.
I thought you were talking about when you got out of the jet boat because it's like you had to change quickly.
But I'll tell you what, Paul, you brought it to everybody's attention, and it's an actual thing. I thought to myself, and you just saw the amount of people who basically jumped over. Probably one of the more popular posts that you've actually put up there on New Zealand Sport Radio, and it was absolutely. It was fantastic. There were people that were passionate out there. So what it says, there are stories out there, and the stuffs of this world can put that
go jump
information
because
out there, but they're a big part of the problem.
The stuff is a massive part of the problem because at the end of the day, it was only in the last 6 months that they cut their sports journalists in half, or even more.
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't. Yes, and there's so one of the guys who's on the Nick's newsletter, our new footballing show, is like has just graduated as a journalist, and he's a bit annoyed maybe for the fact that he can't find anyone that will take his articles. It's like, and he's like, look, there's no young journalists. That's right, they sacked them all because the old guys, the old boys club is looking after itself, and there are so few jobs. They're jobs for life, and they open up once in a blue moon.
Actually, just on Aaron's mention there, cricket club used to get no coverage from the Herald. I remember years ago, it's Tuesday again, but Tuesday in the Herald was all secondary school sports results. Secondary school sports results. You used to go there and see what the sport that you follow. You look at your school generally because you're looking at your school, right? And you're saying, how did they go in the first 11 cricket go? How did the netball team go? Whatever, you don't get any of that anymore either. It is.
So there we go, folks. Someone mentioned further up that they reckon that Australia is all cricket. No, I think you'll find that Australia is a segmented market, and as Ashwin said, in Melbourne it's all AFL, in Sydney it's all league, and in some at certain times of the year cricket will get some coverage as well. But I think in Australia it's slightly different, being a bigger market, being a more segregated market as well in each area. But there we go. Thank you very much, guys. We've overrun. As always, I hope you've all enjoyed the show. Don't forget you can support New Zealand Sports Radio at patreon.com/NZ Sport Radio. I'll be posting up my chat with Aaron about some grassroots rugby for your ears only. That will go up tonight or tomorrow. So that'll be an exclusive for supporters. So if you want to hear that, I was talking about some of the stories in the community game, then sign up for that. Thank you very much, Ashwin.
No worries, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Yes, it's good night from me, and it's good night from him and him.
Good night.
And Stephen will pipe up in the next show going, this grassroots stuff, I think we should talk about that and what media coverage it gets.